Welcome back to another deep dive, everyone.
Yeah.
This time we're
Related.
venturing into the heart of India's democracy, specifically their judiciary.
It's a big one.
It is a big one, yeah.
Lots to unpack.
Yeah, we've got some really compelling excerpts from Indian Constitution at work to kind of guide us.
It's a great text.
Yeah.
Really gets into the weeds
It does.
of how this system actually works.
And I'm eager to get your take on how this all works.
Well, it's
A fascinating system.
it's a fascinating system for sure. And
Yeah.
this text, I think, really gets beyond just sort of the dry,
Right.
articles of the Constitution and shows how it actually plays out, in the lives of everyday citizens.
Right, because it's one thing to talk about the theory,
Right.
but it's another to actually see
Absolutely.
how justice is
Yeah.
meted out, how it's experienced by people on the ground.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we often hear when we talk about a healthy democracy is the need for an independent judiciary.
Yes, absolutely.
Why is that so crucial?
Well, I mean,
Especially in a democracy as diverse and as complex as India?
think about it this way. Imagine a game
Okay.
without a referee.
Right.
It would be chaos.
Right. Total chaos.
So an independent judiciary
Yeah.
is like that impartial referee
Right.
that's ensuring everyone's playing by the rules, upholding what's called the rule of law, which essentially means that whether you are a powerful politician or an ordinary citizen,
Yeah.
you are equal
Right.
in the eyes of the law.
Equal before the law.
Exactly.
That makes sense. But how does India actually guarantee that independence?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah,
Because it wasn't like judges are somehow immune to all the
they're
pressures
not living in a bubble.
that everyone else is subject to.
Yeah.
So so this is where the Indian Constitution comes in.
Okay.
It lays out some pretty serious safeguards
Okay.
to guarantee this.
Like what?
So for example,
Yeah.
judges are appointed for fixed tenures.
Okay.
They can't be easily removed from office
Right.
simply for making an unpopular decision.
So job security is one factor?
Yeah, job security is huge.
Okay. What else?
Financial independence is another big one.
Okay.
The judiciary has its own budget, separate from the government's control.
Okay.
This prevents any undue influence through funding.
Interesting.
And get this,
Yeah.
judges even have a degree of protection
Mm-hmm.
from personal criticism.
Really? So it's
It's
not
a free-for-all.
open season on criticizing a judge's decision?
Not exactly.
Okay.
The judiciary has the power to penalize anyone found guilty of what's called contempt of court,
Right.
which are essentially actions or statements
Yeah.
that disrespect the court's authority.
Right. So there's a balance there, right?
That's a very delicate balance.
Between respecting the judiciary
Yeah.
and also holding it accountable.
Absolutely. Independence doesn't mean
Right.
being above scrutiny
Right.
or criticism.
Yeah.
The Indian judiciary is ultimately accountable to the Constitution
Right.
and, more importantly, to the people it serves.
To the people, right?
To the people.
And speaking of accountability, one of the things that really struck me
Oh.
reading through Indian Constitution at work
Yeah.
was the case of Mittal,
Oh, right. Well,
which really kind of exemplifies this idea of justice delayed is justice denied.
yeah, it's a tragic case.
It is.
Very tragic case.
It is here.
And it really highlights
Yeah.
how the wheels of justice can sometimes turn incredibly slowly.
Yeah.
Here's a man
Yeah.
who spent agonizing 7 years
7 years.
behind bars
Wow.
awaiting trial for a relatively minor offense
Right.
that he may not even have committed.
It wasn't even clear
It wasn't even clear.
if he had actually committed a crime.
By the time his case was finally heard,
Yeah.
he had already endured
Right.
a punishment,
Right.
far greater.
Right. Because
His 7 years
than any sentence he might have received.
of your life just languishing
Right.
in prison.
Exactly. It's heartbreaking.
It is.
It really underscores the very real human cost of a system
Right.
that at times
Yeah.
struggles to keep up
Yeah.
with the demand for justice.
Right. Yeah.
There's just so many cases and
not enough.
And not enough resources and
Resources to go around.
it's a huge challenge.
It is a huge challenge.
For sure.
And a reminder that
Yeah.
access to swift justice
Right.
is so essential.
It's not just about justice being done. It's about justice being done
It's about
in a timely manner. In a timely manner.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, we often lose sight of
For sure.
when we talk about these big abstract concepts.
Absolutely.
Like justice and the rule of law.
It's about real people.
It is about real people.
With real lives.
With real lives.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a powerful reminder.
It is. It is.
Sure.
And I think a good
Yeah.
kind of jumping off point to delve a little bit deeper into the structure of this judiciary.
Right.
The Mashal case. Yeah, it's a stark reminder that, access to swift justice is essential.
It is.
But let's maybe shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
And talk about the structure of this judiciary.
Good.
What does it actually look like on the ground?
So picture a pyramid.
Okay.
The very top,
Mm-hmm.
you have the Supreme Court of India,
Okay.
which is the apex court of the land.
So that's the ultimate judicial authority.
That's it.
The court of last resort.
The court of last resort, exactly.
But I imagine they don't handle every
You're right.
traffic ticket appeal that comes through.
Thankfully, there are tiers to this system. So below the Supreme Court, you have the high courts,
Okay.
each of which is responsible for a particular state or a group of states.
Okay.
And then further down, you have district courts and then subordinate courts
Okay.
dealing with more localized matters.
So it's a multi-layered system.
It is a multi-layered system.
Each level with its own sort of specific jurisdiction.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the top.
Okay.
The Supreme Court.
Yeah.
What kind of power do they actually wield?
So when it comes to legal matters in India,
Mm-hmm.
the Supreme Court's decisions are final.
Okay.
And they're binding on all other courts.
So their word is law,
Their word is law,
essentially.
essentially.
What are some of the key areas where this authority kind of comes into play?
So remember those disputes between states we're talking about?
Yeah.
Settling those falls under the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction?
Okay.
So they act as that final arbiter
Mm-hmm.
in any conflicts that arise between states
Okay.
or even between a state and the central government.
So they're like the referees
Okay.
of India's federal system.
They are.
Making sure everyone's playing by the rules.
Keeping everybody in line.
Okay.
But their role goes beyond that.
Okay.
The Supreme Court also holds what's called appellate jurisdiction.
Meaning that if you disagree with a decision
Exactly.
made by a lower court,
Yep.
you can appeal to the Supreme Court.
Precisely.
Okay.
Of course.
Yeah.
There are certain criteria that need to be met.
Right.
The case typically needs to involve a significant question of law
Mm-hmm.
or a potential misinterpretation of the Constitution.
Right. It's not just
It's not just any little thing.
Yes.
It's got to be something substantial.
So it's a system of checks and balances
Exactly.
within the judiciary.
Within the judiciary itself.
As well.
Yep.
Ensuring consistency, I guess.
Consistency is key.
And fairness
And fairness, of course.
in how the law is applied.
Absolutely.
Across the country.
Across this vast and diverse country.
This vast and diverse country, exactly. Now, this next bit is where it gets really interesting.
Right.
Indian Constitution at work
Yeah.
mentions something called advisory jurisdiction.
Right.
What is that?
So this is a unique aspect
Okay.
of the Supreme Court's role.
Okay.
The President of India
Mm-hmm.
has the power to refer
Okay.
matters of public importance
Okay.
or even questions of constitutional interpretation
Mm-hmm.
to the Supreme Court for advice.
So the president can essentially seek
Yeah, it's like
legal guidance
getting a legal opinion.
from the highest court in the land
Exactly.
on the very top.
So it's not binding. It's important to note
yeah.
that the Supreme Court's advice
Mm-hmm.
in these matters is not binding on the president.
Okay.
It's more of a consultative role.
Okay. So it's like,
It's like a sounding board.
yeah,
They're getting some expert advice,
getting
but ultimately the decision rests with the president.
interesting. Yeah. But it speaks to the Supreme Court's authority,
It does.
right?
It really does.
And their expertise.
Their expertise.
In matters of law.
And the Constitution.
They are the guardians of the Constitution.
Now, we've talked about the court's power,
Right.
but what happens when someone believes
Mm-hmm.
that the court itself has made a mistake?
Okay.
Are they completely infallible?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the principle of accountability. It's crucial to remember that judges are human.
Right.
And therefore,
Yeah.
not beyond making errors.
They make mistakes.
They make mistakes.
Like everyone else.
Like the rest of us. Okay.
So that's where Article 137
Yeah.
of the Indian Constitution comes into play.
What does Article 137 say?
It grants the Supreme Court the power of what's called judicial review,
Okay.
even over its own past judgments.
Hold on. So they can review
They can
and potentially overturn it
potentially overturn, yes.
for their own decision.
It's a mechanism that acknowledges
Wow.
the possibility of error
Okay.
and provides a way to rectify it.
Interesting.
So it's like a self-correcting mechanism
Okay.
in a way.
So they're not afraid to say,
Exactly.
you know what?
We got it wrong.
We got this one wrong.
We need to take another look at this.
Okay.
Now, the power of judicial review, though,
Yeah.
extends beyond the court's own judgments.
Okay.
It's a concept that's central
Okay.
to the Indian judiciary's role
Okay.
in upholding the Constitution as a whole.
And that sounds like a good segue into the next part
It does.
of our deep dive
Right.
where we kind of
Let's do it.
delve into this concept
Okay.
of judicial review
Nice.
a little bit deeper
That's good.
and how it plays out
Yeah.
in the Indian context.
Let's get into it.
All right. You
Okay.
mentioned judicial review.
Yep.
Sounds like a
It's a big one.
pretty important concept,
It is. It is.
especially in terms of the judiciary's relationship with
Yeah.
the other branches of government,
Mm-hmm.
Parliament in particular.
You've hit the nail on the head. Judicial review essentially means that the Supreme Court has the power to examine the constitutional validity
Okay.
of laws passed by Parliament.
So they can,
So if the court finds that a law
yeah.
violates any provision of the Constitution,
Mm-hmm.
they can declare that law void.
Wow.
They have the power to strike it down.
So they're like the guardians of the Constitution.
They are the guardians,
Oh,
making
go for
sure
it,
that,
all that.
that all the laws passed
Right.
align with
Those core principles, yeah.
its principles.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's a powerful check
Right.
on the legislative branch.
Yeah, because in theory.
And it ensures that those fundamental tenets
Right.
of Indian democracy are upheld.
Parliament could pass any law.
In theory,
Yeah.
they want
They could try, but
But the court's there
this is where the judiciary steps in and says,
to say, hold on a minute.
hold on a second.
This isn't right.
This might not
This might not fly.
jive with the Constitution.
Exactly.
Right.
Now, this power of judicial review,
Yeah.
it isn't just about striking down laws.
Okay.
It's also about interpreting the Constitution
Mm-hmm.
in a way that reflects
Right.
the evolving needs and values.
Right. Because society changes.
Exactly. Society changes.
The world changes.
Values evolve.
Values evolve. Exactly.
And the Constitution needs to be able to adapt
Right.
to those changing realities.
And so the court plays a role in that.
The court plays a crucial role in that adaptation.
Okay.
And this is where this idea of
Sure.
judicial activism comes into play,
Right.
which I know is a bit of a...
It's a bit of a loaded term.
It's a loaded term. It can be controversial
Right.
because some people would argue that,
Sure.
judges should just stick to interpreting the law,
Right.
not making it.
Right. Just
They should
keeping
be-
up balls and strikes.
Exactly. They shouldn't be activists. They should be umpires.
Right. Right.
But it's not always that simple
Right. And I
because the law itself
it's
has to be open to interpretation.
public interest litigation comes in.
Exactly.
Let him-
PIL is a prime example
Right.
of how judicial activism plays out in India.
And you
What
mentioned
did we thought of?
the Hussainer Khatun
Yes.
and Sunil Batra cases
Mm-hmm.
as examples of that.
Those cases were groundbreaking
Okay.
because they really expanded
Yeah.
the very definition
Mm-hmm.
of what constitutes a fundamental right
Mm-hmm.
in India.
Give me an example.
So, for example,
Yeah.
the Hussainara Khatun case
Mm-hmm.
brought to light
Yeah.
the plight of
Yeah.
under trial prisoners
Right.
who were just languishing in overcrowded jails,
Right. Right.
forgotten by the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the court said,
Yeah.
hold on a second.
Yeah.
These people have a right to a speedy trial.
Right.
That's essential to a fair justice system.
Right. So it's not just about
It's not
justice being served.
let's just say, okay,
It's about how it's served.
eventually we'll get to your case.
Right.
It's about
a time frame.
doing it in a timely manner.
That makes sense.
And then you have the Sunil Batra case,
Right.
which emerged from a single prisoner's letter
Wow.
detailing just horrific abuse
Wow.
within the walls of a prison.
So giving a voice
And that case,
to the voiceless,
it's shown a light
essentially.
on the rights of prisoners,
Okay.
saying that, hey,
Yeah.
just because you're behind bars
Right.
Doesn't mean
You don't give them.
you give up your constitutional protection.
Oh, you're right.
You're still under the protection
Okay.
of the Constitution.
So these cases demonstrate
They really do.
how PIL can be used
It's a tool
to give a voice
for social change,
to people who might not
for those who might not otherwise
have it.
have their voices heard.
Right.
Exactly.
And it's led to some pretty significant change.
It's led to the recognition of rights that weren't explicitly listed in the Constitution.
Yeah, gimme.
Like the right to a clean environment.
Okay.
The right to education.
Interesting. Okay.
These things that are essential for a just and equitable society.
Yeah, but how has this gone over with Parliament?
Well,
you've got
this branch of government.
It's been a bit of a bumpy road.
That's essentially taking on a...
Yeah, there have been clashes.
Historically,
there have been some real clashes.
Society.
Between the judiciary and the Parliament.
Yeah.
How has that relationship...
One of the big sticking points...
kind of played out?
Was the right to property.
Okay.
So when Parliament attempted to pass land reforms aimed at redistributing land to the poor and marginalized communities, the courts at times struck them down.
Really?
Citing the right to property as a fundamental right.
Interesting.
And this led to this huge debate about the limits of Parliament's power to amend the Constitution.
Right, because who gets to decide what those limits are?
Who has the final say?
Right.
And that's where the case of Anand case comes in.
This is the big one.
This is the big one.
Indian Constitution at work, really.
This was a landmark judgment.
Highlights this.
1973, the Supreme Court basically said, look, Parliament, you have wide powers to amend the Constitution. But
there are limits.
There are certain fundamental principles. What the court called the basic structure. That cannot be altered.
So even Parliament. Elected by the people.
Is bound by these core principles.
Well, these principles.
Enshrined in the Constitution.
Wow.
And the judiciary, through its power of judicial review, is tasked with safeguarding those principles.
So it's this constant...
It's a constant dance. A balancing act.
Between
the judiciary and the Parliament.
The judiciary.
With the Constitution.
The guiding force.
With the Constitution serving as this kind of...
The rule book.
North Star.
The rule book, the North Star.
And it sounds like Indian Constitution at work.
It does a great job.
Does a really good job.
Of capturing these nuances.
So kind of illustrating how this all plays out.
Because it reminds us that, understanding the Indian judiciary, it isn't simply about memorizing articles and case names. It's about how it lives and breathes.
It's about appreciating this dynamic interplay
between these branches.
Between the branches of government, the evolving interpretation of rights, the constant quest
for a more
just and equitable society.
Just an equitable society.
That's what it's all about.
And how the judiciary plays a role in that.
Exactly.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is. It's a fascinating system.
It really is.
Full of complexities and challenges.
As we've seen.
But ultimately, driven by this pursuit of justice.
The pursuit of justice. Well said.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure, really.
Into the heart of India's judicial system.
Yeah. Always happy to talk about this stuff.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
On this journey.
Hope you learned a thing or two.
We encourage you to check out Indian Constitution at Work.
It's a great read.
And embark on your own deep dive.
Yeah. Do your own exploring.
And as you're reading, think about how can we ensure that justice remains accessible to everyone.
That's the key.
And how can we as citizens...
That's the fundamental question.
Contribute to upholding...
How do we participate?
Those values enshrined in the Constitution.
How do we make it better?
Those are great questions.
Yeah.
And until next time. Keep those minds engaged.
Keep those brains ticking.
And those questions coming.
Absolutely.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.
See you later.